cost there did come down. Localization, about a quarter said they needed it. About 38-40% said they got it. Now, localization is a little bit tricky because, of course, some companies do not have localization. We did not separate them out. We did not ask the question of, do you localize at all? Perhaps we could or should in a follow-up survey, but this survey was actually quite long already. So, almost half got information exchange, almost 40% got personalization, and about 21% got compliance, which was by far the lowest number, but of course only about 10% actually said they needed it. So overall, you see some really, really shiny numbers. They did very, very well. We asked people, what structure are you using or planning to use? What will you be using? Or what did you choose when you implemented? And the headline here pretty much says it all. The answer was DITA. And that was especially interesting because we had implementations going all the way back to 1995, which means that we had people implementing before DITA was actually available to the public. Nonetheless, DITA won in every category: past implementers, present implementers, and future implementers. Now, I will say that this chart is, in a way, a little bit misleading because when you look at the DocBook market share, you can see that it goes from perhaps 20% of past implementations to somewhere around 4 or 5% of future implementations, which would tell you that DocBook's market share is going down, and that is in fact the case. However, what actually appears to be happening is that the number of people implementing DocBook is staying the same. So let's say you have 10 people every year implementing DocBook. That has stayed the same every year. What's changed is that in year one you have 10 people implementing DocBook and 20 people implementing DITA, and in year two you have still 10 people implementing DocBook and 40 people implementing DITA. So DocBook's market share is going down, but overall it does not appear to be actually decreasing. It looks as though what's happening is that the DITA implementations are expanding the overall pool of people that are moving to Structure. There are new people coming into Structure and choosing DITA. We did ask about other specs, such as ATA, which is an aerospace spec, and military standards, S1000D. None of these showed up in any particular sort of significance. We asked about custom Structure. That is, similarly to DocBook, staying basically the same in terms of number of implementations, while DITA's implementations are going up. We also added AuthorIt to the mix here. AuthorIt is a little bit tricky. The AuthorIt application in version 5.2, which is the latest version, does have structure in the sense that you can validate against a template, sort of. But it is not XML-based structured authoring. So we did have a few people that said they were using AuthorIt for structured authoring in the past. The way I understand the AuthorIt tool, that is not actually possible because our definition of structured authoring does not include template-based authoring, which is what AuthorIt has provided up until now. So there's a bit of an anomaly there in terms of the AuthorIt data. It is relatively small. We left it in here because we did want to show that, there were some outliers here and some other things going on. Also, S1000D, I know, is out there and is being used by quite a few people. I don't think you can take these numbers as market share necessarily. There is probably a bias reflected here in terms of the people that participated in our survey. So we looked at DITA, since, of course, that was the thing that everybody was talking about. And then we asked people about cost. How much did it cost to implement? Now, I have to put some disclaimers on that data as well. When we asked people how much did it cost to implement, by far the most popular answer, with around 40%, was I don't know. I don't know what the budget was. I have no access to those numbers, those types of answers. So when we calculated this data, we had to throw out the 40% that said I don't know. leaving us with only about 60% of the respondents to this particular question or set of questions. So keep that in mind when you're considering how these numbers look. So when we ask past implementers, how much did it cost to implement? And we asked this across the board, and then we filtered out the DITA responses and compared them to the other responses. Past implementers, the number was about the same. So the cost of implementation was about the same as other structures. For present implementers, which is the people who said their implementation was currently underway, DITA implementation was actually reported as being slightly more expensive than other structures. And then interestingly, the people that are planning to implement in the future, they estimated that DITA would be significantly cheaper than other structures. So when we said, are you implementing in the future? And they said yes. And then we said, what are you implementing? The ones who said DITA gave a number that was significantly lower than the ones who said something other than DITA. Now, the past and present numbers were actually pretty consistent, within 20% or so. So now we have to ask the question of, are the future implementers just wildly optimistic? Or is it that future implementations will be smaller than the past ones that have already been completed? I do not know the answer to that question. I will speculate, because we did see that the people that were planning future implementations did pretty much across the board have slightly different data than the past and present implementers. So my speculation is that actually both things are going on, that they're overly optimistic and perhaps the implementations will be a little bit slower. So when you start thinking about implementing DITA, if that's the direction that you're going in, I did want to talk a little bit about what the cost factors are that would drive that cost up or keep it down. This is not from the survey. This is from our consulting background and experience in the various projects that we've done here. So within DITA, you have the ability to customize content using a process called specialization. Specialization is probably the number one thing that drives DITA costs up. Specialization has the advantage that it allows you to create a structure that more closely matches your requirements, but actually putting it in place and then supporting it does add to the cost of your of your implementation. Output is the second one. The DITA Open Toolkit gives you the ability to take DITA content and create other formats like XHTML, various kinds of help. If you have output requirements that go significantly beyond what the toolkit gives you, especially if you need web-based help, that is going to push the cost up. We've had several projects where our clients have asked us to build web-based help, which is a format that is not supported out of the box by the Open Toolkit. So having to do that and then customize it significantly will result in significant cost. PDF. Complex formatting in your PDF output, complex formatting requirements in your PDF output will drive cost of implementation up, and in some cases up into the stratosphere. Legacy documentation, if you have content that you are planning to convert over to DITA and you have a lot of it, that will kill you. That can easily be the cost of the implementation of the actual technical work to do the implementation a number of times over. And finally, the more contributors you have. If you have 2 authors, it's typically cheaper to implement than if you have 20. So cost of implementation does scale with the number of contributors, usually because of training costs. And of course, the more contributors you have, typically the more legacy documentation you have. The more contributors you have, typically the more languages you have, or the more output requirements, or the more complex the environment is. So all of those things, it's not really the number of contributors. The only thing that really affects directly is the cost of training. It's the complexity that comes with them. So this slide takes a little explaining. What we asked people was, who did or is doing or will do your implementation? And then we gave them 4 choices. Outside resources, so consultants, mostly outside resources with some help from employees, mostly employees with some help from the outside, and employees only. Now, the key here, I think, is to take a look at these 3 groupings, these